Hi everyone! This series of videos is going to take us through lesson 9L, which is about something called the power property of logs. This is kind of the last of a series of lessons that's meant to help prepare you for what you would see in math analysis if you go on that far. So keep in mind that this is good if you're going on, but not essential. This is something that if you understand it is great, but not necessarily a deal breaker if you don't. So I want to make this disclaimer only so if you feel as though you're kind of at your wit's end with some of this stuff, you don't spend too much time stressing about what's on this page and rather can focus on the things that are more important to you. Just so you know, a lot of this is not really on the final exam or anything like that. So prioritize your time wisely, and if it feels as though your time would be better spent trying to understand other things that were from earlier in this semester that you do think are more likely to be on the final, like retesting Unit 7 or Unit 8, then focus on those things. This is great for those of us going on to math analysis, but definitely not as essential for those whose algebra journey kind of ends here and now. If you're willing to keep going with me though, then in question number 1, we're going to do some practice with evaluating some expressions. Now, in question number 1, you have an equivalence to deal with, which means there are two expressions that we'll have to deal with simultaneously in each part. We'll start with part A. We have log base 2 of, now it says 4 cubed, but you might want to use a calculator and rewrite that. 4 cubed is actually 64. So I'm going to write this as log base 2 of 64. It says log base 2 of 64 is equal to something. Now, the best way to think about that, sorry, let me negotiate my paper a little bit so that this little clip is out of the way. There we go. The best way to deal with that is to say to ourselves, okay, 2 to some power has to give me 64 as an answer. Well, we know that it's going to be 2 to the power of 6. So 6 is the number I was looking for because 2 to the power of 6 is 64. Now it says, which is equivalent to something times log base 2 of 4. So now I need to think about this. Something times something is going to have to give me that 6. Now, log base 2 of 4 is the same idea. 2 to the power of something that gives me 4 as an answer. Well, we know that's a 2. So this whole expression is really gone, and there's just a 2 there. And now that I think about that, something times 2 would be 6. Well, that would be 3. So it's kind of a lot to unpack. It's kind of a lot to have to think about, but that's the idea anyway, is to fill in the left-hand blank first. That represents a power, 2 to some power that had to give me 64. And then on the right-hand side, I do the power thing again, 2 to the power of something that gives me 4 as an answer to figure out what goes in the missing space. So we'll do another one just to make sure that we understand it. Log base 5 of 5 squared. Now I don't want to bother with 5 squared. That just seems kind of unnecessarily complicated. I'll just call that 25. So now we're saying 5 to the power of something has to give us 25 as an answer. We know that number is 2. Now let's do the same thing in the second expression. 5 to the power of something has to give us 5. Well, we know that's going to be a 1. And since we're dealing with equivalence, we need something times 1 that gives us 2 as an answer. We know that would be a 2. So hopefully you can see where I'm coming from here, and we'll keep going just to make sure that we can see all of these examples. Log base 3 of, now 9 squared is 81, so I'm going to rewrite this. And I'm going to ask myself, okay, powers. 3 to the power of what is 81? Well, that's going to be a 4. And then we want to do our equivalence here. So log base 3 of 9 means 3 to some power that gives you 9 as an answer. That's going to be a 2. So something times 2 must match the 4. That means that missing space must be 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. Now the last part, let's take a look at letter D. We have log base 2 of, let's check out 8 cubed. Might want to use a calculator for that only because that's kind of a big number. 8 cubed is 512. So we have to say to ourselves, okay, 2 to the power of something has to be 512. So you'll have to guess and check some of your powers, but it looks like 2 to the power of 9 is 512. Now on the other side, let's double check here. Log base 2 of 8 means 2 to some power gives me 8 as an answer. That value must be 3. So something times 3 has to give me 9. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, if all of those blanks were kind of confusing, if you're just like, wait, whoa, where did all that come from? That's actually okay. Because now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. See if you can make any observations, any patterns that jump out to you, any little somethings where you can say, hey, wait a minute, I see what's going on here. I see how this problem on the right-hand side was equivalent to this problem on the left-hand side of each part, because there is a relationship. There is something that ties together this problem, 3 times log base 2 of 4, to this problem, log base 2 of 4 cubed. If you just heard me say something, you were like, wait, she said the same thing twice. 3 times log base 2 of 4 and log base 2 of 4 cubed. If you just heard a similarity there, see if you notice what that similarity is. And then see if the same similarity appears in letter B. Something about 2 times log base 5 of 5 needs to resemble log base 5 of 5 squared. See if there's anything that jumps out to you there. In letter C, 2 times log base 3 of 9 has something to do with log base 3 of 9 squared. What's that relationship? In letter D, 3 times log base 2 of 8 has something to do with log base 2 of 8 cubed. Listen to that. Hear that. Did you hear something that appeared in both? Because if so, maybe you saw a pattern. Whatever pattern you notice, try to write down in question number 2. And if you don't feel like you can articulate it, stay tuned for the next video where I'll try to explain it in more detail.